Hello and welcome to the second session in the webinar series, Google Analytics for Agencies. Today's session, Exciting Insights with Lightspeed Analysis, will show you how to use the right tools to dive deep into your data to identify performance opportunities. I'm your host, Jesse Nichols, and although I primarily work with agencies, the content of this webinar should be relevant to most online marketers or web analysts as well. Today's session will review features such as complex and advanced segmentation, as well as custom reports. It assumes you have already watched or mastered the contents of the first session, introducing the new version of Google Analytics. If you have not watched that session, or if you are not familiar with the new interface, you may want to review that video. You can find it either by searching Analytics for Agencies on YouTube and looking for Introducing the New Version of Google Analytics, or by following the short link on the top right side of the page. For clarification purposes, that is goo.gl/I56L_X. This is an ongoing series that meets once every 3 weeks at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. You can see the series dates on the right-hand side, but if you would like to sign up to receive an email reminder before each session, you can follow the short link on the left and complete the registration form. Again, that short link is goo.gl/I5H. Today's session will help you understand how to dig or drill through data in GA, how to effectively understand and apply the concept of visitor segments, and how to use the advanced toolkit within GA, such as custom reports and advanced segments and others, to identify and, again, better understand your most valuable or least valuable user segments. Let's begin by reviewing just what a segment is. A segment is a group of visitors within your data that have one or more characteristics in common. So you can see in the example in the upper left, these characteristics is the one of region, and the one that we are identifying as an individual segment is California. Each of those regions or states is a segment, but if you move to the upper right side, it could also be a combination of characteristics. And in our example, we've chosen the segment of visitors who are from California and also came from Google as opposed to some other traffic source. And you can see that that segment is considerably smaller, about half that of the one of California. However, it could be almost any number of dimensions that we are grouping visitors by. So you can see in the bottom left example that this segment we're looking at is those from California who came from Google as opposed to any other traffic source, and who had a specific monitor size. And you can see that that visitor segment is considerably smaller than the general one of California, and of course much, much smaller than your overall visitor group. So why is this important? Well, in any of these cases, as you slice your data into smaller and smaller segments, you are able to better identify their performance and evaluate whether they're overperforming or underperforming compared to other equally well-defined segments. This is the core concept within analysis. If you have a set of visitors that represent all of your web analytics, that is your data set, then analysis is the process of looking at different ways that visitors comprise that data. Again, it's the process of identifying dimensions along which you segment. Your ability to optimize visitor segments increases as that segment becomes more distinct. So as an example, it may seem that your California traffic has a higher conversion rate along the goal that you've set than your New York traffic. Both of those are segments, and the analysis says that California does better than New York as far as conversion rate. However, upon further analysis, it could be that it's actually California CPC traffic that has a lower conversion rate than your New York CPC traffic. By adding the additional dimension of medium and picking the segment CPC, you have a better understanding of who is converting with each segment and what you can do. So, even if California traffic has a higher conversion rate than New York traffic, If you have the most control over CPC visitors, then it's more interesting for you to know that California's CPC traffic actually has a lower conversion rate than New York CPC traffic, and you can act accordingly. We'll show more examples as we go on, but to help build on the understanding of what kinds of segments exist within your web traffic, within Google Analytics, I've identified 3 types of segments: visitor, visit, and action segments. A visitor segment is a group of visitors who have in common some quality about themselves or the way they got to your site. Some quality before they arrived on your site is the key idea here. And by pivoting on one or more visitor qualities, you can learn more about what those visitors do once they arrive in your site. So examples of visitor qualities that you can investigate are what region or country or city they're from, what language their browser is set to, what source sent them to your website, whether or not they've been there before, if this is their first time, and what hour of the day they arrived. Again, these are qualities before they arrive or as they arrive on your site, before they've actually started their site visit. You can also investigate based on what technology they use to reach your site, or even if you have AdWords linked, what specific elements of your AdWords SEM campaigns sent visitors to your site. And again, we'll talk more about what it means to pivot on one of these dimensions, but here are some early examples of key segments within those dimensions. So for example, within region, you could be looking for the segment of visitors who are from the West Coast, in which case you identify visitors from California, Washington, and Oregon. You could be looking at along the dimension of ad content, you could be looking at the segment of just those visitors who came through your recent promotional ad copy. You could be looking for the segment of visitors or the group of visitors who all came during the work hours of the day, so 9 through 2 p.m. in this example, or early work hours at least. Or you could be looking at the segment of your visitors who specifically came through what you've identified as social traffic. Now, not all of these segments come automatically. Some of them require some configuration. We'll talk about that throughout this series. But generally, these visitor segments identify characteristics of a visitor before they arrived on your site. And once you've identified or pivoted around this segment, you can learn more about what these types of visitors do once they arrived on your site. The flip side of that are visit segments. And visit segments are visitors who've shared some sort of common experience while on your site, regardless of where they came from or how they got there. By pivoting on one or more visit qualities, you can understand what qualities of a visitor are likely to send traffic that engages with your site in a specific way. So again, for specific examples, you could pivot around visitors who used your internal site search while on your site, who saw certain pages or even landed on certain pages. You can see visitors who triggered certain events or custom variables, both of which require additional page tags to be activated, so not all accounts will see that. Or you could even see pivot around the types of visitors who purchased certain products or came back within a certain number of days to purchase. And again, e-commerce needs to be activated through the use of page level tags. They just not come automatically. But some examples of visit segments to pivot around would be visitors who landed on a specific promotional landing page, visitors who played a video if you've defined that action with an event, visitors who've logged in as opposed to not logged in, what media or what geographies sent visitors who are logging in, and again, that needs to be defined with tags. Or visitors with site search. It's helpful to analyze sometimes what keywords are sending traffic who ended up using your site search functionality. It might indicate that that keyword actually didn't send to the right page. The final type of segment that I've identified are action segments. If the first two try to group visitors along common dimensions, these segments group visitors along common metrics. And action segments are visitors who all behave in a certain way and therefore have common performance metrics. These segments isolate visitors who meet or miss performance benchmarks that you've set around metrics such as goal conversion rate or pages per visit, and they allow you to identify where those visitors came from and what they did or didn't do while on your site. So again, some common metrics to pivot around are visitors who have spent a certain amount of time on your site, who did or didn't bounce, who may be new or returning, visitors who spend a certain time on each page or were triggered a certain number of events, visitors who completed or did not complete a goal or specific type of goal, or visitors who spent a certain amount on your site if you have e-commerce set up. And again, here are some specific examples of segments to pivot around. The first example is visitors who did not bounce. To bounce is to land on one page and leave immediately before viewing any other pages. And so you either bounced or did not bounce. It is a 0-1 equation in this example. The second example are visitors who refined an internal site search more than twice, which means they were highly ineffective but dedicated to finding something within your site and may necessitate a review of your internal search functionality. The third segment identifies the group of visitors who spent more than $100 in revenue with an e-commerce purchase. And the final segment identifies visitors who completed at least one goal that you've identified on your site, greater than 0, at least 1. So we're going to dive into the Google Analytics account for the Google Analytics blog. If I can dive in there and do our analysis there. And I'll remind you that this information in some cases is not always ideal, since a blog does not necessarily reflect the most common Google Analytics user, but we'll be trying to teach to some of the fundamental concepts within the report suite. So what we're looking at here is the new version. If you haven't yet watched the introducing the new version of Google Analytics, keep in mind that all visitors have the ability to access the new version in a new version link when they log into Google Analytics. You can see, because I'm in the new version, I have an old version link, but if you were to log in directly, you may need to click on new version before you can get into your account. We're here on the location. We can go right to the location report, which is formerly known as Map Overlay. I apologize if I'm navigating just a bit fast. Again, most of the navigational concepts within Google Analytics were discussed in the last session, so do bear with me or pause this video and go back to the first video of navigating or introducing the new version of GA. So the first thing that we're going to do is just view the segments along this dimension. The dimension we're looking at is country and territory, the available segments. The top 10 are listed here. We have over 185 segments that we could view using the drop-down menu if we wanted to see more. The first level of analysis is to view that, yes, we have segments that represent this dimension and that their performance differs according to the difference in metrics. And of course, we can explore our more meaningful metrics such as goals. And again, what we're analyzing is what are the conversion rates, how do the metrics differ among our segments. So the first thing that we can do when you're talking about quick insights and quick analysis is do what's called simple segmentation. So I view a different dimension and the different segments within that dimension appear. But if we want very fast analysis or very lightning speed analysis, as it claims to teach, what we'll do is click into a distinct segment. For this example, we'll be using the United States. And here we're now looking, instead of an entire data set, we're looking just at the U.S. You can see here this segment analyzer will always remind you of what percentage of your visits you're looking at. The U.S. represents about 22% of our Google blog visits. So within the U.S., we can go one further dimension, and now we're looking at the dimension of region. These are the segments that are encapsulated in that. But we don't have to stop there. One of the more powerful but subtle tools within analytics is what's known as the complex segmentation tool. It's always found here with this other link. You'll find it in nearly every report. And what it allows you to do is, within the segment of U.S. visitors, again, that's what they have in common. They're all from the U.S. We can understand what other aspects of these visitors are available for review. So when you click the other link, you'll be presented with 4 categories that reflect our visit suite. And each one of these categories will allow you to view other dimensions of this segment. So, for example, if we wanted to know, well, what language are the browsers set to from people from the U.S., we'll give it a moment to load. And what you'll be looking at is for the U.S. only, not for all visitors, what language the browser set to. And of course, it reflects that this is mostly English-speaking languages. But we don't have to stop there. We'll skip technology for now. But you could say, well, what sources is the U.S. from? I know what my top sources are in general, but I want to know just my top sources from the U.S. So it's very helpful to start changing these dimensions to things that you can control. And again, the idea is that within the U.S., 22% of visitors, these are the top sources, and those top sources could look different for the UK, could look different for other language-speaking countries. We've got many people coming direct, obviously very strong brand presence, a number of people coming from Google, what looks to be a manually set source of Google, google.com, the search engine, FeedBurner. We could go even further. For the US, what are the top keywords? And this is particularly helpful. If you want to know what the top keywords are within a specific country or even a specific city, as long as you can isolate that segment, you'll be able to view these other dimensions about it. So we'll show that example in just a moment. But it can be very helpful to analyze what are the top keywords for a specific segment, what are the top ad contents for a specific segment, landing pages. And again, there's two ways to navigate through this. You can either search if you do know exactly the dimension you're looking for, or you can simply expand these little carrots to understand better what you're able to analyze by. So this is called the complex segmentation tool. I'm going to show you one more example of it in location before showing a few other features. So again, we'll reset the location report. Before we went to the US and analyzed other dimensions. Now let's look at a specific city, such as, just to shake things up a bit, Hanoi, to better understand what's going on with those visitors, where they came from, and how their traffic might be reflected. So we've got the metrics along our Hanoi visitors, and I'm actually going to change that to goal set just to make it more relevant. Click Other, and we say, well, what language are Hanoi visitors have their browser set to? Do we need to consider multilingual blogs for whatever reason? Fortunately, here a vast majority have them set to English, so no need to regionalize. But we still want to know more. How are these visitors getting here? And if possible, what keywords are they using? And does that differ from other cities or other reasons that we could analyze? So what we may need to do at this point is export this list. And again, if we want to export the entire list, we may need to expand it. Export this list and then go to other cities and export those lists and do some offline comparison. So we can see here that that our brand is not quite as strong. More people are using FeedBurner or RSS Feeder in this region than they were in the US. And our manually tagged Google visitors are far lower than our organic Google visitors than they were in the US. And we could analyze what keywords are people most responsive to in this city, what campaigns are people most responsive to, ad contents, how does that change by region? So what we've done here is first identified the segment that we're interested in, and then we drill or dive into it by clicking, and then we learn more about that dimension by using that complex segmentation tool. So there are a number of ways to find segments. One is just to look down the list, change this, expand the number of rows, and simply view the segment based on the metrics that you want to analyze by. The other way is to do a quick search. So we'll type in Russia and press Enter, and of course we see Russia right here. And what that did is it searched along the dimension of country, search for Russia. We can close out that search with a little X there. We can also use the advanced table search, so the last search we did was Russia, and you can see that applied there. We could, however, change this to just show me the rows where the goal conversion rate is greater than, for this example, we use 50%. So it does actually use the number, not the, it's not a percentage like 0.50. You actually use 50, or whatever it is you're trying to find above. Again, we have a very light conversion, which is to say more than one page or more than 2 pages per visit. So show me all the rows with more than 50% conversion rate. You can see a significantly different list here. All the conversion rates are above 50%. Great way of using the advanced filter. And you can see that there are a number of metrics that you can filter by. And what you're doing is saying, show me the number of rows where this element reflects this rule. So bounce rate is less than 20%, for example. And you can see for the very few sources where the bounce rate is less than 20%, it's usually very low traffic countries who have a high conversion rate. So let's check that back to a more relevant metric. And again, rows where the goal conversion rate is greater than 50%. So what we've done here is shown you how to do primary segment analysis. You literally look at a specific dimension, which you identify the dimension through the report you've chosen, and then you either analyze by looking down the list of segments. You can search simply for a specific segment you know you want to review. You can do an advanced table search just to find certain segments that reflect a rule that you'd like to apply. But these are all ways to identify segments. And once you go into a segment, you can drill in by clicking on that segment. That's when you can use the complex segmentation tool to view other dimensions of this segment. So Spain represents 8.5%, much lower than the US is 22%. But again, we can find out what ad content did people in Spain, were people in Spain most likely to respond to, or what source, and sometimes the processing might be a little slow as we move through the beta phase of this interface, but what source are these visitors most likely to respond to? And again, significantly different from our US traffic. Our brand is less strong, though stronger than it is in Vietnam. RSS feeder, still the most effective way to send out traffic, although Twitter making a much larger presence here than it may have been in Vietnam. So I want to show a couple more examples of this in other reports, but right now, again, what we're trying to establish is how do you initially identify segments, and you do that through searching or just simply scanning. And once you get into a segment, once you isolate a segment, what can you do with it once you're there? And that question is answered by, well, what else can I know about this segment? Now I isolated the campaign segment of Blogspot feeder, RSS feeder, or Google Analytics Blogspot RSS. If you wanted to know, well, what ad content are people responding to most often with this? Oops, excuse me, I actually used a different feature. What ad content are people wanting to know most about within Blogspot? And so just to wrap back up, I'm looking at a visitor segment, something about the visitor before they got to the site. This is the campaign they saw. And what this row number 1 represents is a multi-dimensional segment. The first dimension is campaign, and it's the visitors from this RSS feeder blog. The second dimension is ad content, and it's specifically the Google Feed Fetcher ad content as opposed to other ad content, right? So those are the kinds of questions that you can ask once you identify a segment. You identify a segment by drilling into it. But as I mentioned, a segment can have more than one dimension to it. So we have a tool called the secondary dimension tool here, where in a single, let's say, for example, what the exercise I want to try is to click into each campaign and then do the advanced segment by ad content. Well, for each time I wanted to analyze it, I'd have to click into a campaign, segment by ad content, export, click on campaigns to refresh, click on this, segment by ad content, export, segment by ad click in a new GA blog, segment by ad campaign, ad content. You can see how you have to go through this repetitive process. Well, to get around that, if you know what you're going to be segmenting by next, and you're prepared to reckon with the amount of data you'll get, use what's called the secondary dimension. And here you're simply applying that second level of dimensioning right in the primary report. And you'll see what I mean once the loading is finished and the secondary dimension comes up. So what are we looking at here? Not set, not set. This is a single dimension where neither the campaign has been manually set nor the ad content has been manually set. So if you're looking at the campaign dimension, not all visitors have a campaign dimension. In fact, most of them do not. Most of them are just visitors from either organic or free or untagged sources. So we can ignore those. That is a segment of visitors. This is the next segment of visitors that we should find interesting. Visitors who came through this campaign and this ad content. You can see that this campaign comes up over and over again, but with different ad content. So what can we do with this? Well, we can expand this and then export. Or we can simply do the analysis within the interface and say, well, for my goal that I've set, what ad content drives the best performance based on the campaign it came from? So if you have the same ad content that you're using across multiple campaigns, it can be really helpful to analyze, what ad content seems to match the best, the campaign the best. Because some ad contents, even if it's the same variations you're testing in different campaigns, some ad content will perform better in some campaigns than others. Alternatively, if you have the same campaign names, and you can see how I X that out, but I'll show that again. If you have the same campaign names from multiple sources, for example, you have the same campaign names in Google and Bing and others, you can simply add the second dimension of source and see the same campaign and how it performs based on the different sources. So again, this allows for a more specific segment that you'd like to review, and as I mentioned, the more specific the segment you're looking at, the better you're able to make decisions to influence that segment. So this is still one segment, it's just one row, even though it includes two dimensions. And that's the secondary dimension tool. I'm going to show you one last example of this in Pages because it is fairly distinct in the content section. So I'm navigating to Pages within site content. And you can see in here, these are my segments. Visitors who came to this page, this is the home page, visitors who come to this, to that, right? So what you can do is you can isolate that segment by clicking into it. And then again, you can either know more about it, such as, well, what geography is sending the visitors to this page, or what technology does the technology influence the way the visitors are perceiving this page? So, for example, some screen resolutions might not adjust to this page better than as well as others, and therefore you might have a higher bounce rate with certain screen resolutions. You can see the lowest bounce rate exists in the most common dimension screen resolution. This is I believe a laptop, but you can see there's a higher bounce rate for certain other resolutions and lower for others. So it may be worth testing those resolutions to understand, well, is it coming through the way that I imagine? Does screen resolution really have an effect on the page, or is it just something else about the user? However, what you can also do, instead of using this complex dimension tool, is simply click on the navigation summary at the top. And this is effectively isolating this segment still. So we're still looking at this segment. People who are looking at this page represents about 10% of our viewers. And what we can know is questions like, what was the previous page, right? This is another dimension about visitors on this page. What was their next page, right? So this is still in a very large sense, just a way of knowing of another dimension of this specific segment. So we go back to the Explorer. You can you should be able to analyze a tremendous amount about this specific page. Actually, if we go to landing pages, I think that was the other report I was looking for. Again, we can isolate a specific segment. This is the same page we were looking at before, new Google Analytics Overview reports. Number of entrances and bounces are the metrics we're going to analyze this by. And once you're looking at this segment, you'll notice this is a little bit different. This is not the segment of everybody who's looked at this page. This is a segment of everybody who's entered at this page. They have to have come from outside the site. So from all of your landings, this represents about 15% of all total landings. Even though it was 10% of all total page views, landings are specific. But now that we've isolated the segment, we can go to entrance paths and say, again, once they started this page, what was the next page? And even then, what was the page after that? So if you look at the path of readership, they started at the new Google Analytics Overview page. Many of them searched through a label and then left through one of these pages, and a bit of additional insight on this page. Or, again, still looking at the same segment, 14.5% of total entrances, we can say, well, what sources sent visitors to this page? For SEO purposes, we can say what keywords, when they did send a keyword, what keywords sent traffic to this page. And again, not all visits send a keyword. In fact, very few sent a keyword for this one. But you can at least start to understand the sources. You could say what ad content were most likely to send visitors who viewed this page or landed on this page. Again, very intelligent analysis, very deep analysis done very, very quickly through using the complex segmentation tool, or simply the concept of identifying a single segment and then pivoting around that segment to know more about the other dimensions that could be meaningful to you. So this is the concept of pivoting. You identify and pin down a segment, and then by pinning that down, you're looking at other aspects of that segment of visitors. Now, other than secondary dimensions, what can we do with this? Well, the concept here is, again, to identify segments and then analyze the performance of that segment so that you can then either make an action or make a more specific segment. So one way of doing this is to go to each report and then select the segment you want to identify and then learn more about it. However, another way to pivot around segments is to simply use the Advanced Segment tool. So I'm going to go back to the overview and show you the advanced segments. And this is familiar to those of you who have used advanced segments in the past, but just to review, what is advanced segments looking at? By all defaults, we're looking at all visitors. That is the segment, which is to say not a segment at all. It's simply all your visitors. However, if what we were really concerned about analyzing were new visitors, we could apply that segment and navigate through the reports just looking at new visitors, visitors that was their first time within the date range you're looking at. Or again, for example, if what you're really concerned about, and you can see the new visitors segment here, as you actually, in just a quick point, as you carry through the reports, you'll note that you're still looking at the same segment, and this is one way to verify you've got the right segment, is to find the report where those visitors live and confirm that that's all you're looking at. So if what you're really concerned about is search traffic, you can apply that segment. And again, navigate through the reports, doing the analysis only on the visitors who matter to you. Now again, why is this important? Well, just because one segment appears to be doing better than another doesn't mean that there's not a specific aspect or dimension of that segment that's really driving its performance. So again, it could be that California appears to be doing better than New York traffic at longer conversions, but what's really driving the performance, or what you really have control over, is your search traffic. And so it's best to analyze within search how the performance changes or how the performance differs so that you can act upon that. So one of the easiest ways to start getting involved in advanced segments is to simply start clicking around and comparing these segments. You can also benchmark these segments against all visits, but what that implies is that you can compare segments. So it's highly recommended to pick two segments that are meaningful in their comparison, such as new versus returning, paid versus non-paid, and we'll show some more in a moment, and compare those two segments. And you can see we're comparing them here. As you move around, you should constantly be able to compare the metrics. And again, the idea is to move outside of the standard report into reports where this metric analysis may be more insightful. So as you move to location, you can quickly see what is the performance of new versus returning visitors in the various regions. And again, this data wasn't possible to get, but you'd have to do some serious segmentation analysis, such as go into United States and then segment by new versus returning. But in many cases, this isn't even data that was otherwise available in the interface. So again, what we're looking at here is where is there a significant difference between new versus returning performance in each country, and what can we do about that? So if Spain and Italy are seeing significant performance differences, and particularly within new, the new visitors seem to be the most likely to click in, well, what we can know about this? Since it's a blog, it's very likely that old visitors don't feel the need to click through multiple pages since they come regularly. And if they're new, they're feeling a little bit more exploratory, and they'd like to figure out, is there any content that I should be reviewing, historical content that I should be reviewing. Again, you can do the same for other important traffic sources or content and better understand how do these segments compare. And it's, although difficult, certainly not impossible to find what are the segments that are most meaningful to me. For example, if you have goal conversion set up, which you all should have, you can choose visits with conversions. If you have e-commerce set up, you can choose visits with transactions and say, well, what are the visits like who send me conversions? What sources are sending me the most conversions? What landing pages convert the most often? And here's a good example. The landing page is one, or if you wanted to know conversion rate by landing page, you could set up you could compare your all visits against visits with conversions, and either do a simple by glance comparison to get a % difference, or you could export this and simply divide visits by conversions by all visits and know that this landing page has a probably 30% conversion rate. This landing page, however, has a 60% conversion rate. This landing page has 60 or 70%. This landing page only has a 25% conversion rate. So although this equation needs to be done offline, or I'll show you some other ways that you could possibly perform this, these advanced segments can provide a tremendous amount of insight by comparing segments to each other. If segmentation is analysis, then your goal is twofold. One, identify the most important or interesting segments. That doesn't mean the best performing segments, but the most interesting ones. And then two, compare that to other interesting segments so you realize the delta. You want to know the difference between segments' performance so that you can optimize the better, or you can push the better segment even further and optimize the worser segment to perform better. So those are the default segments. I'm going to set this back to all visits to bring it back to the standard. But what you can do is create custom segments to fill in the gaps where they otherwise might exist. So as we apply this, we can see that I've created a number of segments here. You can create a new custom segment here, but that'll actually bring you to the screen. I'm going to take you to it in a moment. This is a little bit like a cooking show where I've got the meal prepared before we walk in. So if we want to know visits with conversions, that's one thing, but let them know also visits without conversions. So I'll edit this, but otherwise I'll click New. And again, the idea here is you name it something obvious, you include or exclude, and what this is doing is saying, out of all my visitors, show me the visitors that meet this rule. So you have all of your dimensions and metrics. And this is why it's important to get familiar with the complex segmentation tool, because it starts to introduce you to the names of these. So you can either scroll through all of them, or you can start typing. I like to type things like total, since the totals are very interesting. But if you know exactly what you're looking for, you can type that in there as well. I suggest getting familiar with these. Even though it's a long list, they should be relatively reasonable to understand. So show me the goals, show me the visits where they total goal conversions equals 0. So again, you're analyzing individual visits. For every visit, show me the one where a goal completion equals 0, so they did not convert. And you can preview that segment, or you can simply save it. And once that segment loads, we're going to apply this back. At times, you have to reset the segments. We want to compare visits without conversions to visits with conversions. We want to remove all visits. We're going to press apply. And again, what this is going to show is how do the landing pages without conversions compare to the ones that are with that did convert. So you can see this should equal about the total. Now, this doesn't mean that you won't see a little bit of sampling. And what does sampling mean? Well, that just means that in order for the sake of getting you this report quickly, we take a statistically significant sample of your entire visit set and show you just the visitors, the percent of your visitors that is meaningful to the whole. So although these numbers might not be 100% accurate, what you're really looking for here are trends, not necessarily the most accurate numbers. And you do sacrifice accuracy for speed with Google Analytics, but we think that as we continually improve our algorithms for sampling, you'll provide more and more value without having to worry about, did I get the exact number? And you'll be much more excited to see just how the trends perform. So again, although this is simply a split conversion rate, how many did convert as opposed to didn't convert, when you apply this to other sources, such as all traffic or keywords, you can start to understand, well, what did the visits who did or didn't convert, what did they look like? What were the distinguishing marks? What geographies did they come from? What traffic sources did they come from? And visits with and without conversions is just the start of complementary segment analysis. Complementary segment analysis is what I refer to when you have two or more segments that make up a whole. So there's visits without and visits with, right? So there could be search visitors and non-search visitors, right? That comprises everybody. New versus returning. Those are complementary segments that tell a story about the entire pool of your visitors. So that's how you create a custom segment, right? You click on the custom segment, you pick what you want to analyze by, and then you create the rule that meets it. However, these can get increasingly complex. But I suggest starting light, right? What I first suggest doing is finding a report that includes a segment that you want to know more about, right? So before, we identified that landing page that we thought was interesting, the new Google Analytics overview, and what I'll do is just copy that, and then I'll go and create a new advanced segment, new custom segment. And again, even if I have to double check it, I'm looking right at this dimension. This is the segment I want right here. I want to capture that and learn more about it. So landing page is the dimension. So I'm just going to go up here. Landing page contains, and it actually auto-populates the URL that you're looking at in most cases. So if we call this new GA overview landing page, we can preview this segment. This might take a while because it's a very specific segment. But you can see it must have worked. It represents about 14% of the traffic. And what you really are looking for is, here are all visits. That's what we saw before. But the new GA landing page captures only visitors who've landed on that page and none other. So we'll go ahead and save it. And then we'll remove all visits. So that's how I isolate a segment. It's up to you to determine what metrics make a segment meaningful or interesting to you. And there, you can see there's some cases where landing pages are similar but have an extra parameter. Even so, it's still meaningful to me. You can see the whole life cycle of this segment. Very interesting, certainly at least to me. And then as you navigate other reports, you can say, well, what traffic sources? Again, this is similar to the analysis we did before while we isolated that segment. What traffic sources sent visits to this guy? And within that traffic source, what were the best ad content? And this process might take a little bit longer to load just because we're looking at such a distinct segment, and the rest of all of these reports come pre-aggregated as we process them for quick review. Whenever you go outside of the aggregation, it can take a little bit longer to load. Since we created a custom segment, we can't possibly have aggregated for all custom segments that are available. And so as these load, you can just see that what we're looking at is just the sources that sent traffic to that landing pages, just the campaigns that sent traffic to that landing page, just the keywords or ad content. You could even look at just the organic keywords that sent traffic to that landing page as opposed to just the paid keywords. Tremendous amount of analysis, just really, I mean, indescribable speeds compared to the depth of analysis that you're performing on this data. And such a small data set at that. We're looking now at just 0.01% of all your visitors, and yet we're able to quickly dive in and say, for that specific landing pages, what were the organic keywords that sent traffic? If I'm sending social traffic, I can say, well, how did that perform, and what did it look like compared to other types of social efforts? So if there were Twitter and Facebook, just tremendous amounts of data about what you're trying to explore all in one place. I'll create one more type of segment for you just to give you another sense of how to create custom segments. But again, the easiest way to start with custom segments is find the segment you want to analyze and just recreate that, and then just start exploring other reports and seeing what else you can know. Once you've created a segment, start to explore other reports and do other advanced segmentation and other complex segmentation, and as I've showed you. So if we wanted to create a custom segment, we can call what I call a tailored segment. This is something where it's a kind of a group of similar segments. So let's say branded keywords is the segment we want to create. So keyword is what we're looking at. And we can say it contains Google. And what does that mean? Well, there are lots of keywords that contain Google, but I want to know about all of them as a group. So if we previewed that segment, and even saved it, you can see only about 8% of our visitors came through branded keywords. But let's say, well, I know that there are actually other words that I want to know about. So there's Google or visitors who came through the keyword analytics. Analytics. Or visitors who came through the keyword. Let's see if there's any misspellings of analytics that I want to know about. But if there were multiple types of keywords, so this tailored segment is similar, one dimension, similar concepts. It's very helpful if there's misspellings, right? G-O-O-G-L or G-O-O-G-L-E-G-L. You can use what's called a pipe. So you can see this little looks like an L. It's actually a shift forward slash for those of you who have a PC, although on a Mac I think it's a similar one, probably Apple forward slash. But anyway, the pipe means or. So you can either use these or rules and create as many or rules as you'd like, or you can just put the pipe, analytics, pipe, misspelling, and then analyze that segment. So that's a tailored segment, branded keywords. There are others that I could show you, for example, multi-dimensional segments. I have about 10 minutes left, so I might just wrap up with custom reports. But again, the idea here is that you're trying to pivot around a segment that's meaningful to you. Either they've done something that you like, or they did something you didn't like, or they did something you don't understand and you need to learn more about. You isolate what you can, learn more about that segment, hone it down a little bit more, and then come back and say, well, it's not just branded keywords that I'm interested in. It's actually branded organic keywords. So if I edited this, so it's keywords who came through Google, and medium is organic, not paid, right? Or it's actually keywords people who came from a branded keyword through organic traffic, not paid, from the United States, right? So what we're doing is continually narrowing down this segment, because what we want to do is influence their behavior in some way. So let's say we were buying paid search, so Google CPC from the US or Google CPC from California. We want to know what our branded paid traffic just from California or even just from San Francisco is like, right? So we can know a tremendous amount about our visitors by honing down a very, very, very specific segment, and performing an analysis on that. So what do we want to know about these? Well, what landing pages were they going to? What pages were they looking at? How many of these people were converting? Did they use my internal site search? Did they trigger any events or custom variables? There's almost an endless amount of information you can know about them. What did my San Francisco visitors respond to? What ad content were they most responsive to? What campaigns were they most engaged with? Just reams of data that you can start to analyze as you hone down specific segments. And they can be single-dimensional segments, they can be default segments, they can be multi-dimensional, hyper-complex segments. The idea is that you're exploring and isolating specific segments and then trying to know what else you can about them. So for the sake of time, I'm going to try to wrap up with custom reports. For those of you who were on the last session, you noticed that custom reports have moved. The tab is now up here for these, and you can create multiple custom reports. You can change the name of them very easily. You can share them with increasing visibility, and there are certain features that will continue to roll out, such as being able to share with other profiles. But if you just want to share a specific custom report with someone, you can do that by copying the URL below. So what are some good custom reports to start with? First one I like to talk about is the simple custom report. And that is, some of these reports, by the way, will not have much or any data in them because of the data we have in our Google Analytics blog account, but they should have some data. In some cases, not very much or not very meaningful. But the first one is a simple custom report. And what does that mean? Well, it's strictly that. You isolate one dimension that you want to know more about, like medium, and you simply list as few metrics as that person needs to tell the story that they need to know, right? So you try to actually give less data, not more, and you give them just what they need to know. So you can even go by other tabs to give them other data. But again, the idea is that you're making them work the least amount for it. And you don't want to for simple reports, you don't even want to allow them to click into to do other analysis, because again, they might not know exactly what they're looking at. And this is just a high level or a medium level, I would say, overview of what they need to know. So if we edit this, we can see what the guts look like. This is what a custom report looks like. You give it a name. We'll talk about filters in just a moment. You give each tab a name, and we'll talk about what a flat table is in a moment as well. You give the metric group a name if you want, but what you're looking at is, you pick the metric from the list, and you can either scroll down, you can type the metric in, You can type a word within the metric and look for that. So what they need to know are visits and total goal completions and conversion rate. Then you can add just those 3 metrics. Select the dimension that you want to analyze. You want them to analyze by. And you can see there are a few new ones you hadn't seen before, such as date, month, week, and in some cases hour, depending on what metrics you've chosen. But the idea is that you just pick one dimension. You don't want to allow them to drill because it starts to get into a complex custom report. They'll have to know more about this process. But that said, you can share these custom reports. You can export them and increasingly share these around your organization or your client's organization as needed. So that's the simple custom report. Complex custom report will allow you to do multiple levels of analysis. And what this will let you do is do the analysis you would have done with something like the complex segmentation tool. Here we've got keyword, and you remember last time we took, for an example, we could have chosen a keyword and then used the other complex dimension tool to select landing page. Well, a complex custom report will help you skip that step by going from keyword, drilling in, only the metrics we're concerned about. We can see directly at the landing page. In this example, we can go start from the landing page, and instead of using the complex segmentation tool, we can just see what keyword visitors search for. And again, the idea here is that you're skipping the step of using the complex dimension tool. How do we do this? Let's click on Edit. We've got our SEO analysis page. We add another dimension. And what we've done here is chosen the metrics that we're most interested in. The way that we'd like to drill through our data, and we showed that before by drilling, to drill you click on a single segment, and then you use the other tool to learn more about it. However, here you can see that using the other tool is not necessary. And we can even add filters. Well, what does a filter do? It allows you to limit what segment of data you start with, so that you're ignoring data that doesn't matter. So this is SEO analysis. We only really need organic traffic, right? And so if we apply that filter, you'll avoid any unnecessary traffic. So that's the start of a complex segment report. And this data was available in the interface, right? You could have gone into a keyword and segmented by landing page. Some data, however, is not really available through the interface. So there's complex custom reports. There's unique complex custom reports, such as hour. If you remember, you might not have noticed, but there's no way to segment a specific there's no way to look at the dimension of hour for a specific segment within the normal interface. So if we want to know what hour of the day is FeedBurner sending me the most traffic, and should I be aware of this to optimize accordingly? That wasn't available in the standard interface. We're going to get that information in just a moment here, although again, it's going to be encrypted, so you may need to back it out. And again, this is the hour based on the actual day. So you can export this, transform this data as needed, and look at it in another way. Let me show you what the guts of this looks like. Now we've got hour of day. We also have just hour, which would show you just not the hour and the day. It would just show you hour individually. And again, we've got the metrics that we're interested in. And when we save that, we can now perform this unique analysis. This was not available otherwise. We can perform this unique analysis by looking at specific sources or specific geographies and say, well, what hours do those people, is that dimension sending me traffic? Is that segment sending me traffic? What are the hours that are sending me the traffic? And what are the hours that are sending me the best traffic, right? I didn't have goal conversion rate, but it would have been very easy to put that in there. So hour is just a fantastic way to know, well, what hours of the day are my tweets working best? What hour of the day should I be launching campaigns or dropping the most money into a paid campaign? Right? What hour of the day do certain cities or certain states respond best to, and should I be targeting campaigns individually to regions based on the hours that they are performing the best? So a unique custom report, very, very powerful. And you saw how easy it was to put this together as long as you have control over what metrics are available in GA and what dimensions are available in GA. And not every dimension can be mapped to every metric. Not every dimension can drill into every other dimension, but pretty darn close. Since you're working with a database, unlike many other tools, you can segment your data basically any way that was meaningful to you. So I'm going to show you flat tables just really briefly to cap this training off, but just tremendous. I hope you've at least had impressed upon you what it's like to drill deep, deep, deep within data, looking at minuscule percentages of your total data set, and then working within them. It's just tremendously powerful information. So here you can see for flat tables, one example that I like to use is very common is to merge cost sources. Since you can't import cost sources from other marketing campaigns into GA, you should look for opportunities to export your data out of GA and map it to cost sources individually. So, for example, if we've been running display campaigns through something like DFA or AdWords even, but DFA or other content networks, then we can say, just show me the visitors who've come through display, and we're going to go to keywords first, and change it from Explorer to Flat Table, and then we're going to set two dimensions that are meaningful for us. So in this place, we want to do campaign and keyword, and this one is campaign and ad content. Mind you, and you'll notice this is a lot like secondary dimensions. You're still looking at a single segment of your visitors, notably campaign and ad content, and then you're defining what metrics you want to measure them by. Now, since we didn't do any display advertising to send people to the GA blog, I'm going to take that filter off. But what this allows you to do is save this report, export it, and then export your cost center information in the same way, for example, with campaign and keyword, and then you simply go along the list, mapping it to the right row. And this might take a little bit of time, but it can be extremely effective in knowing, well, for whatever I paid for this campaign and keyword, how many of those people visited, turned into a visit, how many of those people converted, what was the conversion rate, what was my cost per conversion, right? If you had e-commerce, you could even know what was my return on ad spend, so long as you're able to effectively map campaign and keywords or campaign and ad copy for a display campaign to your cost source information. And so flat tables, again, each of these are segments. They're each like a secondary dimension that you've added. Very, very powerful for mapping the cost data or mapping to other cost sources or just doing general widespread analysis. And again, you can export up to 500 rows at a time. Go to the next page, export 500 more if you need to. Just a very, very helpful little way to review campaign performance. And this is, again, sortable or analyzable by most of the standard ways you would want to do this. Well, that concludes this session. Hopefully you've gotten a sense of what the types of visitor segments are and how you can quickly identify great visitor segments within Google Analytics, how to use custom reports and advanced segments to better understand distinct segments of your visitors, and how to generally make positive use of the extremely advanced functions within Google Analytics. I'm going to end with the title slide so that you can review here. Our next session, Measuring Multi-Channel Media, will allow you to better understand how campaign tracking works within Google Analytics and how it'll set you up for some future feature launches that are very exciting. Future sessions will include a deeper analysis of how to optimize for AdWords and SEM, as well as how to optimize for display and other non-direct response media, such as social or possibly even mobile advertising. Finally, we'll talk about how to measure customer engagement by using the full analysis tracking feature set within GA that includes event tracking, custom variables, and others. And then finally, we'll wrap up with analytics partnerships opportunities. I look forward to hopefully having you all live, or at least having you watch the recorded version of the future sessions. Thanks again so much, and do have a great day.